This is the nature of things. Autism is the fastest rising developmental disorder in the world. It affects children everywhere.
This is Ali, he's 13 years old, he's autistic. This is Afshir, he's 12 years old, he's autistic.
In the last 20 years, autism in all its forms has increased by a staggering 600% in North America. And so far, medicine can't tell us why.
What we were told was, we have no explanation. Things like this just happen.
Autism's rapid rise, especially among new immigrants, is a clue pointing to environmental causes. Now some scientists are zeroing in on bacteria in the gut as a key to what has conventionally been considered a disorder only of the brain.
The traditional way of looking at autism as a specific brain insult that is largely permanent and unreversible may be somewhat outdated.
We still don't know what causes autism. The current best guess is that many cases are the result of a genetic vulnerability triggered by other factors. The effort to explain those other factors is leading some scientists to an unexpected part of the body, the gut. Autism is affecting more and more families throughout industrialized countries, but immigrants from several non-industrialized societies are being hit even harder. Adar Hassan lives in Toronto with her 4 children. 2 of them, Abshir and Ali, are autistic. They both started out as normal babies.
Hi, baby. How are you? Say hi. Say hi. Okay, what's going on?
Somali communities in Sweden and the United States have autism rates 2 to 4 times higher than in the general population. Toronto's Somali community has a similar problem.
The first year of his life, I would say, was normal than my 2 previous children. But suddenly,
After Ali was treated for recurring ear and chest infections with multiple courses of antibiotics,
he started, refusing coming near me. He started crying all the time and going under the table, things like that. He began walking his toes and refusing to eat food, just want to drink, cow milk. He was having a diarrhea, 10, 15 times a day. And his eyes, it's not even there, it's like another world. And no one helping, how many doctors I've been when I was struggling with Ali's condition, no one helps.
Ali had a lot of health problems, and some of them seemed food-related.
You want to go outside or you want to play?
But no one could say why. Adar's search for answers brought her and her friend Idman here, where desperate parents are looking for anything that might help. The annual is comprehensive of its kind. Here, scientists and parents alike come to get the latest trends in scientific research and unconventional treatments.
We're New Beginnings Nutritionals. We're a supplement company, and we're highly
with New Life Foods. We offer gluten-free, casein-free, and soy-free essential fatty acids. Improves brain function for children with autism.
Hi, this is Isaac. He's a robot.
Hi, I'm Amy from Living Well, designed by Amy.
Hi, we're standing in front of some hyperbaric oxygen chambers. We use this in autism.
With it, I will personally, as owner of the company, refund your
There is
money.
a revolutionary new product that has come out on the market that is a
GPS real-time tracking device for children with autism. Check us out at www.
With no official medical protocol for treatment, parents are frustrated with the lack of options.
As parents, we want these, but there's a certain sense that we can't wait for science to catch up.
And
Right now, all that most doctors will recommend for this puzzling disorder is behavioral therapy like this.
It's a toy. We're playing with the toy. This is how we play with the toy.
Autism is a spectrum a lot autistic. There's no typical case and no prescription for handling it. 50 years ago, autism was considered rare, affecting only 1 in 10,000 children. Now the rate in North America is 1 in 90 children.
If you continue this up, then eventually, about 25 to 30 years' time, you get autism as the norm in an American family rather than a rarity.
It was thought to be the byproduct of cold, detached mothering, and so the term refrigerator mother was born, and with it a heartbreaking trend in blaming the mother that would lack television watching and food allergies. As stats on the disorder have grown, so have the theories. The most contentious of these has been the suggestion that childhood vaccines are causing autism. A study published by Andrew Wakefield in 1998 launched an avalanche of controversy throughout the world. Even after Wakefield's methods were discredited and his medical license revoked, vaccination rates suffered a steep decline.
Any regrets, Dr. Wakefield?
No regrets, thank you.
Study after study has found no connection to autism, but vaccine theories and Dr. Wakefield himself still have loyal defenders.
Okay.
I'm a big fan.
In fact, one of the star attractions at Autism One this year is actor Jenny McCarthy, a self-described mother warrior who blames vaccines for her own son's autism. She and many parents remain suspicious of vaccinations in the absence of any other convincing theory.
You'll hear people say, oh, vaccines don't cause autism, this doesn't cause autism. I don't know how you can tell me something doesn't cause it if you can't name one thing that causes it.
Lately, most of the research funding has been invested in work on the link between genes and autism. Dr. Stephen Scherer heads the Autism Genome Project at Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital. They're projecting that over 100 genes may contribute to autism, and so far, they have identified 6.
The goal of our research is to find which genes are leading to the development of autism, and so when we make a discovery and we find a gene involved, it starts to explain part of this medical mystery. But it doesn't tell us specifically why that gene has been changed or mutated. We also know through other studies that environmental agents can lead to increased rates of genetic changes. So certainly that's a possibility. We can do those experiments once we know what the target genes are, because we can test indicated or turned on or turned off.
Autism Canada, this is Laurie speaking. Yes, we do have...
Laurie Mollum is the Executive Director of Autism Canada. She gets hundreds of emails and phone calls a day from parents who want answers about autism.
This is a slow day for the phone.
For many parents, gene identification is just too slow.
I think that we have to look at environment now because we know that environment influences our gene expression. And we know that if we understand what environmental triggers are influencing autism, we can avoid those and maybe consequently reduce the amount of autism that we're seeing.
Dr. Derek McFabe is a leading proponent of the environmental theory of autism. He thinks the gastrointestinal problems of many autistic children are a major clue. His unorthodox message is gaining ground in parts of the scientific community and speaks to the experience of parents.
And what they produce has profound effects on behavior. When you really look at the research, infection and gastrointestinal infection and antibiotic use seems to be one of the underappreciated but rapidly emerging causes possibly for triggering or worsening this disorder.
Get propionic acid out of the brain.
This is our hypothesis. So by not eating carbohydrates, it may be a reduction in feeding these bugs to make it.
So you starve.
Yeah. So this may be one of the reasons that particular diets that seem to be.
What Dr. McFabe is saying about the gut bacteria theory makes sense to Adar. given her son's history of gastrointestinal problems. Back home, she finds that a low-carbohydrate diet free of processed foods does seem to reduce their autistic symptoms. Perhaps it's significant that it's more like the simple food she grew up on in Somalia.
I don't buy them, vitamins and things like that. I just feed them food, good food, and that's it. Since I started doing that, I see a lot of difference, in terms of behavior and their gut and all those things. Juice, yum. Hey, easy.
Rates of autism in Somali communities living in the West are curiously high, when back in Somalia, autism is a rarity. So much so that Somalis have begun to call autism.
It doesn't surprise me to hear that if you shift a population from Africa to America or Canada, that you get a shift in disease profile, and that would include autism.
At London's Imperial College have been looking at intestinal flora and their role in health for years. Metabolites, which are the products of the processes of the human body, reveal a great in urine.
So there are thousands of different metabolites in urine, and all have got their own unique radio signatures. So what we do is we drop a sample like this, it's got about 0.5 ml of urine, into a very strong magnet. It realigns all the magnetic nuclei, and we can pump in radio waves and then listen to each molecule basically sing its own frequency.
Dr. Nicholson became interested in the mystery of autism a few years ago and launched a large-scale study of urine from autistic children, their non-autistic siblings, and healthy, unrelated children.
Matt, hi. Oh. How is it going?
So we say we have some more tweaking to do, just of the hardware, really.
So I've had a good idea.
Absolutely, yeah.
The question was there anything about autism that made it different to normal? And so we profiled a number of children. We found they're actually quite different in many different respects. One of the most interesting being that they have significant differences in gut microbial metabolite profiles, implying that the gut microbes inside them were working somehow in a different way to normal children.
Dr. Nicholson has found that diseases have changed in the Western world in the last 60 years, and that increased rates of certain disorders, like autism, correspond to a country's level.
Blessing of McDonald's and all the other things like that, and all the highly processed food. It's also brought us antibiotics. So we've changed more phenotypically, more in terms of our biological signatures, our biological makeup, and our lifestyle in the last 50 or years or so, than we have probably over all our time since the Ice Age. Right, that's a giant change in our biology, so it's bound to have a whole series of consequences. And one of the consequences, we think, is that the microbes, fundamental activity of the microbes and the composition of the gut microbes has changed.
So the question remains, could a change in our microbes affect our bodies and contribute to diseases like autism? Science has only recently started to look at the power gut microbes have over the rest of the body. We are, in fact, more micro to one. As soon as we are born, trillions of bacteria in our guts begin to form. This is called the human microbiome, and it's one of the densest microbial communities on Earth. They have a massive influence over the rest of the body, affecting cellular activity and even switching your genes on and off. One of the keys to normal development is acquiring the right microbes in the right order during critical windows of childhood growth.
So if, for instance, a child were to acquire an abnormal set of microbes, or let's say a hostile set, it is possible that the metabolic development of the child is impaired, and that could include brain development. The important thing to remember in this context is that the development of your microbes from the time you're born, it takes about 3 years to get a sort of adult set of microbes. That's exactly the time course over which synaptic development occurs in the brain. You're making all your brain connections. They're pretty much completed by the age of 3.
A disturbance in early microbe establishment might explain some kinds of regressive autism. This devastating phenomenon is when a child develops normally for up. Just outside Chicago, this regression became a clue that led Ellen Bolte to a surprising discovery.
This is Andy at 1 year old. He had perfectly normal development, hitting all of his milestones. Mama, dada, baba, bye-bye, by, the age of 1.
Andrew is the youngest of Ellen's.
And this is where he's gone.
A medical checkup found fluid in Andy's ears. The physician diagnosed an ear infection and prescribed 10 days of antibiotics, but the fluid persisted. So the doctor prescribed more antibiotics.
He was on his 6th course of antibiotics within a 2.5, 3 month period. I guess the only way I can describe it is he started to shut down. He became withdrawn. He didn't want to be touched. He didn't want to be held.
Eventually, they found that a milk intolerance explained the fluid in Andy's ears. He was taken off antibiotics, but the behavior remained.
He regressed so dramatically that instantly he was seen by many specialists. Ultimately, though, he has very severe autism. At this point, Andrew is 4 years and 9 months, but not really stiff and postured. A lot of toe walking, which is seen in children with autism. Of course, he's not really making eye contact here at all. He had no language at this point, just he uttered noises. Mostly he uttered E, and this is very important. He had a lot of GI symptoms. His stool was foamy, mucousy, bulky. It wasn't like anything I ever seen come out of a kid. But he would eat non-edibles, tissue, paper, ashes from the fireplace, the drywall off the walls.
Ellen's biggest fear was that the developmental window for Andrew to acquire language was quickly passing. She had to do something.
I felt called to start researching in spite of having no medical background at all.
Ellen's starting point was Andrew's history compared with her first 3 children's developmental roadmap. The only difference she found with Andrew was his experience with antibiotics. It didn't take long for her to stumble upon the name Feingold.
One of the lesser-known problems with antibiotic use is that they do impact the bowel flora.
At 90 years old, Dr. Sidney Feingold is still considered one of North America's best microbiologists. He's been
bowel is a remarkable organ. If you were to stretch it all out, it would be the dimensions of a tennis court. It has many different bacteria in it normally, a great variety, probably between 1,000 and 10,000 different types of bacteria. These children are susceptible to ear infections, and so they receive antibiotics, and the antibiotics intend to select out certain organisms while they suppress much of the rest of the flora. Now, the organisms that tend to persist are Clostridia.
Clostridia are a family of around 100 species of bacteria. A few of them are pathogenic, extremely hardy, and resistant to most antibiotics. They also produce neurotoxins that affect the brain. But Ellen found that it might be possible to attack the Clostridia specifically with a particular antibiotic.
I really felt, if we go on this premise, if we act on this premise, he can be helped. An antibiotic that specifically targets Clostridium in the intestinal tract could potentially be a huge benefit to him. So I started writing doctors. Many of them simply referred me to somebody else because they felt it was, outside of their expertise. It didn't clearly fit with infectious disease. It didn't clearly fit with gastroenterology. It didn't clearly fit with neurology, immunology. So I was hitting on all of these different specialists.
After 15 months and 37 doctors, Ellen found a gastroenterologist who agreed her theory should be tested. They began Andrew on an 8-week trial of one of the only antibiotics known to kill Clostridia.
The results were astounding.
Oh, wait.
Within a matter of just a few weeks, he became calm. He was aware of his environment and responsive enough to begin potty training, which was instantly successful. He's now beginning to play with toys. He's leaving clothing on.
Yes. Yes. That's your new word, huh? Yes. No. No. Good boy. Good thing. No. Oh, good boy.
He's putting puzzles together.
He does them all backwards. He did his name backwards. He's doing these all backwards.
Oh, nice kiss. More kisses?
That was the end of the 8-week trial. Dr. Sandler on the spot said, well, we need to test this with more children.
At this point, Ellen and her doctor took their story to Sidney Feingold.
So, Judy, you got some black colonies there?
Yes, it's growing nicely, actually.
And he agreed to help with a pilot study of 11 more children.
How long did they take to show up?
That took 2 weeks to come up.
2 weeks.
Pigmentation, yeah.
I've always felt that bacteria in the gut do things other than cause infections of the classic type. There was never evidence for it, and here was an oldie son. It seemed very logical that bacteria in the gut played an important role.
Sure enough, Dr. Feingold found higher amounts of Clostridia in the stools of the test children, and that 80% of them improved on the antibiotic vancomycin. But there was a catch. In a hostile environment, Clostridia produced spores, essentially going into hibernation.
Actually, spores are resistant to all known antibiotics. There isn't any antibiotic that I'm aware of that can kill a spore. Now, even though we had treated the bacterial cells, I knew that spores remained. And I was quite concerned that when we removed the vancomycin, that any spores remaining in the intestinal tract would germinate and would be right back in business, shall we say. And that, sadly, is exactly what happened. So, there was a lot of very important skills that Andrew was able to maintain, but the behavior, the screaming, the irritability, the don't touch me, I don't want to look at you, the walking on his toes again, repetitive behaviors, those pretty much all came back.
Ellen co-authored a paper with several doctors on the results of the study, and in 2000, it was published in the Journal of Child Neurology. The paper didn't cause the stir in the medical community.
It's people that are not infectious disease trained or trained in microbiology, that bacteria can really do these kinds of things and that they can be controlled.
The medical community may also have ignored the paper because it was thought to be promoting wider use of vancomycin, which is a drug of last resort in the fight against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Ellen believes that there were other issues at play as well.
When the results of that study were released, it seems like what everybody focused on was the fact that the children regressed. And I acknowledge the children regressed, but that is not the point. Why did that happen? Why did they get better? Could it be a neurotoxin-producing bacteria in the gut that was suppressed by antibiotic treatment? I think that that's a valid question, and I think it's a question that has not been answered in 11 years since we published that paper.
That question is about to be reopened by a group of Canadian researchers who stumbled upon a new bacterial connection. Dr. Derek McFabe is the director of the Keeley-Patchell-Evans Autism Research Group. At his lab at the University of Western Ontario, Dr. McFabe is trying to link autism with gut bacteria.
I was aware of the paper by Dr. Sidney Feingold in UCLA showing unique populations of Clostridial bacteria in the digestive tracts of these children with regressive autism. And then in my previous work, we were working with this compound, propionic acid, and we found that for such a simple molecule, it had very widespread effects in the central nervous system, affecting brain development, metabolism, and immune function. And then, we sort of put 2 and 2 together, and we said, hey, these bacteria in the gut, when children eat carbs, ferment the carbs and make propionic acid. And in addition, some of the foods that these children craved, in addition to being high carb, did in fact contain propionic acid as a food preservative. So we thought to take propionic acid and give it in small amounts to rodents and see if the behaviors or brain changes looked anything like autism, and whether or not these behavioral and brain changes were transient.
Dr. McFabe's control subjects exhibit typical behavior. Rats are highly social animals. They greet by sniffing nose to tail and interact as they explore their surroundings. But when a propionic acid solution is introduced, this all changes.
What we noticed remarkably within 2 minutes of putting this propionic acid in, this animal immediately starts exhibiting some very peculiar behavior. You see an abnormal posture of walking with a hunchback. And it's an unappreciated part of autism in that patients often have toe walking, abnormal posturing, arched back. So now we'll place another animal that's been given propionic acid. And a peculiar thing happens. They show none of the normal social greetings of 2 rodents seeing each other.
A video tracking system records and compares the obsessive and antisocial PPA-treated rats with the normal rats. Other experiments showed responses such as rigidity and object fixation, and the intriguing fact that the effects of PPA wear off.
And their behavior afterward, usually after their escapades, they tend to just go back to sleep. So again, we have a reversibility of hyperactivity and a reversibility of social behavior.
The autistic-like behavior of PPA-treated rats was compelling. But Dr. McFabe and his team wanted to know exactly what PPA was doing to the brain.
Hey, Roy, what do we have here? Here are the most recent inflammatory markers.
That's right, yeah.
Imagine these gut bacteria produce the propionic acid, the other fats. But then when it comes to the nervous system, it can get in because it's a small molecule. But there are actually very specific compounds called transporters that actually grab the propionic acid and kind of suck it into the nervous system.
Once in the brain, PPA changes brain fat composition to be similar to that of autistic patients. The brain is 60% fat, and cell function and our behavior are directly related to how those fats are composed. And there's more. PPA could even be switching the genes associated with autism on and off.
Imagine this little molecule from your gut going directly into the nucleus where all your DNA is and acting as a switch to turn on and off important genes having to do with brain development, learning, and memory and metabolism. It's very intriguing that such a simple molecule can do such specific things in a brain metabolism and function that are very consistent with found in autism. Normal or near normal people exposed to high levels of alcohol are not behaving as their normal selves. And by analogy, I think normal or near normal children exposed to high levels of propionic acid, gut bug metabolites, are not themselves. By removing the propionic acid, by either getting rid of the bug that makes it, not feeding the bugs that are there, healing the gut, or using compounds that help break it down, that will be the approach of treating this disease.
So is it possible that gut bacteria research might give us new treatments for autism?
Yes? Oh, no. It's painful, to be honest. It's painful to watch it because we were so close. I really think that we were so close a decade ago to fixing this, but no one would listen.
Many parents of autistic children have established their own treatments.
Andrew is now 19 years old. It's hard to believe that it's been that many years. I do think that it's a war in Andrew's intestinal tract. There is a colony of, I believe, neurotoxin-producing bacteria that established itself and set up camp and set it up good and strong and at an early age. And basically what you become colonized with as a child, those are the bacteria you die with.
Ellen Bolte has found that by giving Andrew massive amounts of probiotics, supplements containing benign bacteria, his symptoms are controlled. The thinking is that even if his Clostridia can't be eradicated, they can be beaten back with waves of competing bacteria.
He functions very well, and that's a relative term. When I compare us to our baseline, I'm very happy with what he can do. Andrew is very self-sufficient. He can cook his own breakfast, pack his own lunch. Academically, he struggles beyond a third or fourth grade level. He still has some very impaired social skills. He is, though, delightful and a joy to be around the house. Andrew, pretty soon you have to go to your track meet.
Have shown that our early gut microbes do stay with us for life, but new research might make it possible to change their composition with medical intervention.
This to me is like a golden opportunity to really look and see what might be going on in this situation, where I can sort of see that there's some problems with the gut and problems with development.
Dr. McFabe and his colleague Dr. Emma Allen Verco from the University of Guelph have begun a unique collaboration with the Somali community in Ontario. Joining forces with parents, they've started a study that will analyze fecal samples from Somali-Canadian autistic kids. Dr. Allen Verco hopes it will reveal what's amiss with their bacterial profile.
And also this entire change that the Somali population has when they come from Somalia to Canada, to a completely different country, a different culture, different food, kind of knock-on effects of the bacteria that live in the gut. The old adage, we are what we eat, I think that's very important. In Somalia, they eat a lot of fermented foods, and that's a very staple part of their diets. They wouldn't necessarily do that in Canada.
It's the way we lived, the food we used to eat. No corn, no soy, no genetically modified things, no nothing. Everything is as natural as they can be. No pesticides, no hormones, nothing.
And maybe they have a microbe that's missing now from their diet because they're not getting it from fermented food. And maybe that microbe might have some direct interaction with other microbes in their gut. Now, if that's a missing piece, is that no longer there? Their gut microbiota might actually not be functioning correctly anymore.
Dr. Alan Verco is working on the idea that the ecology of gut bacteria could be medically manipulated.
Over here we have the robogut, which is a very sort of coined phrase for our artificial gut system that we have here. Now here we're able to actually recapitulate the environment of the human gut, which enables us to culture some of the organisms just by growing them with their friends, essentially, as part of an ecosystem.
Dr. Alan Verco approaches her work as an ecologist, using the roboguts to create whole microbial communities, then manipulating them to see what happens to the stability of the ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem that is incredibly diverse, in fact, probably one of the most diverse ecosystems on the face of this planet. And I liken it to a rainforest. Everyone knows what happens when you start stripping species out of an ecosystem like a rainforest. You end up with a barren sort of landscape, and really the ecosystem just kind of crashes. And this is what we think is the kind of the basis for many diseases.
Dr. Alan Verco thinks there's hope for future medical treatment of bacterial-based autism by replacing flawed microbial ecosystems.
The idea would be that we would get rid of the bad ecosystem with antibiotics, with purging of some kind, the job of a healthy ecosystem.
At the Autism Genome Project in Toronto, Dr. Scherer thinks there's more work to do before connections can be made between the gut and autism.
We may find that in some cases where there's a proportion of autistics that have GI tract problems, they may have specific changes in genes that are common to the brain and the GI tract. That's not surprising to me. In fact, you would expect to see that. What the geneticists really want to do is to catalog all of that data once and for all in one large experiment. It's going to take us a few years to do. And then we can explore all these other hypotheses.
Microbes in the gut. All these may be contributing to the rise in autism. Parents pushing the research and the scientists listening to them are attempting to find a unifying mechanism.
It is not the quest to show that propionic acid is the answer. That's vastly oversimplistic. Where I'm really hopeful is you have all these different camps looking at autism. Genetics, behavior, lipids, gut, bugs. Instead of arguing with each other, there may be something common to this that we can work together. Nobody's right or wrong. It's like the blind man and the elephant. We're looking at different parts of these things. And now, in our small way with a model, we have a way to test these things, validate what the patients are seeing, and, again, linking it to a gut bug.
What's this?
5 minutes.
Yeah, cool down. That's your cool down.
Opposite of exhausted is.
Opposite of exhausted? Yes. Have energy.
Have energy means.
Can keep going. What's this up here?
Distance.
Yeah, that's how many miles you're running, huh? Okay. Yeah, I don't think you ran 345 miles, honey. But it looks good. I cling to the hope that research is going to be done in time, and that he'll be able to receive treatment, and that he will be able to still respond due to plasticity of the brain. Who's to say? And I realize it's hypothetical, but hypothetically speaking, if he is being bombarded by a neurotoxin, if you stop that neurotoxin, he'll do nothing but get better.
Hope of improvement and even recovery is unshakable in other parents too.
They really have a GI issue. And when you have a gut problem, nothing else is going to work. I would love to hear his voice. That's the most important things. He understands more now. He understands everything you tell him, but he can't say the words. So he call me mom one day.
Laurie Mollum of Autism Canada says that a majority of parents report that their child improves when changes are made to their diet.
So why would what you eat affect your brain and your autistic symptoms? Well, the truth of the matter, it does. And because it does, we have to understand why it does. And that's why we need research in the gut brain. And that's why it's the most promising research that's going on out there.
Until fairly recently, we assumed that, or we just didn't really give the gut microbiota any thought whatsoever. And we just thought of it, we knew that the bugs were there, but we thought that they were just benignly there because they ate the waste products that we are doing something that is contributing to health is a fairly new realization. We were really at the dawn of realizing that.
Are the North and South poles about to flip?
The poles flip. It will happen again, but when? That's the big question.
Scientists struggle to understand what will happen if they do.
Ultimately, when it comes to magnetic fields, we are humbled before something that's on a scale far beyond our grasp.
The Nature of Things returns in January.